I'll go over a basic anatomy, so help prevent injuries. I'll go over guidelines for good body mechanics. I love hearing that, you take your breaks. I'm sure you got up and moved and stretched. So let's show you some stretches you can do at your next break period. And we'll go over lifts and transfers. And Rojo Cushion inflation is something that we all do, no matter what department we're in. We're always going to end up pushing a resident somewhere. So we'll review wheelchair portering. So in terms of our anatomy, our whole body is made up of bones, tendons, joints, and other tissues. And all these areas could be sources of injury. You fall an outstretched hand, you could fracture your wrist, or, do a lot of shoveling right now. I did some this morning with the snow. So I highly recommend good warm-ups and proper biomechanics so you don't get those injuries. ER gets very busy in the first few snowfalls. So as healthcare workers, unfortunately, it's the occupational back injuries that tend to be a serious problem. So 50% of all WCB actually tends to be back pain related to healthcare workers, and half of those are related to how we handle our residents and patients. And it's the lifts and transfers that were found to be the most problematic, which is not surprising. One PSW, you might have 8 to 10 residents. How many times are you repositioning or transferring one resident in the day, multiplied by how many that you have? So it is a very common occurrence. We want to make sure we're doing them safely. So I always ask people, how do you know you've had an injury? And so the first sign that everybody says is pain, right? Something hurts. I fall down the stairs, I hurt my butt. Or, you do a lot of shoveling, you might strain your wrist. So pain is usually the first symptom. There are other subtle symptoms like stiffness, pins and needles sensation. I used to have patients come see me in clinic and they say, Sarah, don't look at my back. It's all my leg. I'm getting this numbness, or there's just an ache in my calf. But when I do the assessment, I actually find sometimes a pinched nerve from the back or from the neck causing that referred pain either down the arm or the leg, that shooting pain, pins and needles, burning sensation, numbness. So my main point is if you're feeling any of these symptoms, especially if they're new or worsening, don't let it persist. Go see your physician, go see your physio or your chiro sooner versus later, because it takes longer to heal when you've let an injury sustain and continue on and become almost chronic. So definitely want to look at that and try to avoid some of these common MSK injuries. Like I said, the back strain, the carpal tunnel, it's that thickening of the wrist sheath where it can compress on those nerves and the blood vessels of your hand, causing that symptoms. Golfers' elbow, tennis elbow, so you do a lot of keyboarding, a lot of lifting or gripping. Those muscles that do this motion actually attach to the elbow. So you're constantly pulling and straining on them. You can get inflammation there as well. So what causes us to be at more risk? So obviously, as we age, unfortunately, things start to wear and tear. Our strength and flexibility might change through time. If you've had a previous injury, so if you've sprained your ankle once, didn't get proper rehab, and go run again and sprain it again, your chance of 100% recovery diminishes with each recurrence. So trying to make sure we avoid recurrent injuries. If you do a lot of heavy manual work, frequent lifting, a lot of twisting, so this is your prescription. If you want to develop an injury, you do something with a lot of force over and over again in the bad posture, and I can guarantee you'll get an injury. So don't do that. I'm not asking for more clients. So the main thing is we want to make sure we avoid poor postures and then ergonomics. So how do we do that? So as I said, it's the transfers and lifts that tend to be the most problematic, and even repositioning. So I'm going to give you a real life example. I had a call downtown Toronto. They asked me to come do an in-service for their staff, and how to just boost people up the bed. And you're thinking, well, that seems so simple. But number one, I had them demonstrate it for me, and they had the bed too low. They had those cranking beds. You have to go down to the foot of the bed and get down. Do you think they were doing that? And they said, no, we don't have time. But you do have time. You have time to protect your back. So raising the bed to your waist height. So I always say, if you don't have to get the resident standing up right then, the bed should be at your waist height so you're not having to overreach and overbend. And then they did that, and then they held on to the slider sheet, the soaker pad, and they just did one of these really quickly. You can see I'm just basically pulling, twisting my back. So couple things that obviously, so that twist of the spine that we want to avoid and that pulling action. So I always ask people, would you prefer to push a shopping cart in the grocery store or pull it everywhere you went? What would you guys do? Push. I know everybody's muted, but thank you, Suzanne. I can see pushing. And I think it's, just common sense. Like when you're in the store, it's easier to push because you're using your body weight and your strong muscles of your legs. When you're pulling something, it really is just upper body, upper arm, and neck. And, you could be great going to the gym 5 days a week and pumping iron, but anatomically, your biceps will never match your quadricep muscles in your legs. So the power lifts, the power transfers is all in the legs. And that's what we had them do. I said, raise the bed, feet should be shoulder width apart, lock your shoulders down and back, hold that slider sheet, and then just weight shift from the back leg to the front leg. So you can see I've not twisted my spine. I've kept my back straight. I'm not rounding my shoulders. And when they did that, they said, oh, wow, it does feel better. They said, oh, we learned this in school, but, we don't have time. We just, get into faulty habits. And it takes 21 days to build a habit. I know when New Year's resolutions are coming up. So you can either do bad habit or good habit. So the more you do something over and over again, that excuse if I don't have time is really not there because it becomes second nature to you. So just trying to be mindful. We're trying to protect yourself. You want to be here in the long run. So again, not utilizing safety equipment properly. And I'll give you an example that happened at the York homes. So there was a time when they were sending referrals to physio for how to remove a sling because there was some slings left under a lot of residents. That's a whole other topic. So when we asked the staff, why is it hard to remove a sling? They said, it's too difficult. So how many people does it take to use a Hoyer lift or sit to stand lift? What's the minimum amount of people? You can put your fingers up if you know, or just shout out the answer. 2. Sorry, I forgot. Not everybody here is frontline. So two staff. It takes 2 people because you need one person to kind of maneuver the lift as the other one's kind of holding the resident as they're putting there. So we usually ask people, when do you need that second person? It starts the minute you put that sling under the resident and you don't let that person go until you've removed the sling. Because a human leg, because you usually put one resident forward and you move the sling up and down. And that was what was not happening. They're saying we didn't have time. We tried to do everything ourselves and then only call them in when the sling is already positioned. So you want to make sure you're utilizing equipment properly. We want to make sure we're checking the mobility status. So if we're frontline, we want to know, is this person a 1 to 2 person transfer? So we know that we have the amount of help. Try to avoid rushing, cutting corners, help each other out and watch our biomechanics. So this is the part of the exercise. You can try this on your break time. I need to get everybody stand up, go against the wall. So even just sitting up nice and tall. I want you to imagine a chin tuck, so as if your head is like a drawer. I want you to think of tightening up your middle back muscles. So you're kind of being rounded, squeezing that shoulder blades down and back, stomach in, butt in. And usually everybody's a little bit straighter. And I used to tell people now, feel how you feel. Don't let gut position go and walk back to your chairs. And everybody's like, I can't do this. I feel so stiff. I feel like a robot or a zombie. And it's normal to feel like that. Why? Because we've been in a different posture most of the time. Instead of being nice and tall, we're usually forward head posture, especially all these Zoom meetings, or rounded shoulders. Instead of sitting up straight, standing up straight, we sit slumped, we stand slumped. So we lose that lumbar lordosis in the lumbar area here. We get that accentuated forward head posture here. And, once or twice, not bad, but over time, it will change structures. So I usually tell people, if you want to take your finger, arch it back in the opposite direction, you can try it with me. Probably doesn't feel that bad. But what if I made you do it 5 days a week, 8 hours every day, multiplied by however old you are in years? How would you feel after all those years? You think your finger go back to straight? Probably not, right? So all the structures on the underside of my finger, you can let go, I don't have any injury, become short, tight, and contracted, right? All the tissues on the top part now are pulled, stretched, loose, and weak, and then not a normal pressure on my joint. I go pick something up after all those years, I'm probably strain my back, or my finger, sorry. Your finger is no different from your neck and a back. It's a joint. So anytime you go outside of that, we call neutral position. That's what you're doing. You're doing those abnormal strains. And then you do that and then do work. Now you're just putting a brittle object out there. So things like trauma, wear and tear, aging, osteoporosis, osteoarthritis can affect the joint integrity. So I can't stop the first 4. I don't have a magic pill to make us all youthful again, but we can affect our biomechanics. Okay. So before I go into biomechanics, this is my last anatomy lesson. I want you to think of your spine like an Oreo cookie. The bone is the cookie, the cream is the disc, and we'll wrap it in saran wrap and you save it for your break. So in the lumbar spine, because 70% of our back injuries are that lower area. Okay. So imagine your back like an Oreo cookie. If I bend forward, where does all the cream go? I push on the front part, my cream gets pushed to the back. I arch backwards, I close on the back part, cream gets pushed to the front. That's fine, that's normal. But if I do that repeatedly all the time and spend more of my time pushing that cream to the back, well, we all know what happens to saran wrap. Every time you punch it, it doesn't go back to the same tight shape, right? It's looser and you throw it and get a new one. Well, your ligaments are not that easy to throw out. So what happens is they loosen and relax, and then that's where you can get those disc bulges. So people say my disc slip doesn't really slip, it just bulges. And if it bulges enough, it can hit those sensitive nerves that refer pain either locally or that referred pain I was talking about. So that's why I harp so much on posture anatomy, because if you can visualize it, you can know why we always say try to be in the good body position. So what is biomechanics? It's how you move your body. So you want to make sure that as much as possible, try to do things with your back straight. Try to avoid that twisting by pivoting with your feet if you're holding something. Keep objects nice and close to you. So raising those beds, keeping residents close or objects close, and keeping the movement smooth. So this is the proper kind of quote unquote lifting or power position. Plan your lift. You want to know how heavy or light something is so you know if you can get more help or not. Nice wide base support. So if you, well, you want your feet shoulder width apart, minimum. Maybe one foot slightly in front of the other. So you're nice and stable. The more narrow, the more teeter-totter you are, more likely to have a fall. And this is key. Where should we be bending? It should be both our knees and our hips. So your hips are a ball and a socket joint. Lots of degrees of movement. We really don't utilize them all enough. We all just really sit and stand. So we're only doing one kind of movement, but it can rotate. So that's where the power of lifts are, is your legs. So that example I had of the people when they had the bed lowered too low, I usually ask them, where are your hips? And most people will put their hands here, which is actually the top of your pelvis where your belly button is. So you can see if I put my hands where my belly button is, and if I bend from there, I can see I'm bending my back. But if I think of bending from my knees and my hips, so we're a little bit further down, as if I'm sticking my butt out. I also call it the J-lo, because I think of butt out, keeps at lumbar lordosis. You can see I'm lowering myself, see? And you can see me better in the video, but I haven't bent my back. I'm using the strength of my quads and sticking my butt out as if I'm sitting down in a chair like that gentleman is doing. So that's what you want to do. So whatever you can remember, hip hinge, butt out, J-lo, just to remember that kind of posture. That's what you want. And you want to tighten your abdominal muscles. So each one of us has a back belt muscle. It attaches to the spine and wraps around the waist and acts like a back belt or a corset. So to give you the extra support, better than the external ones that people like to wear. So how do we get it to work? Sit up nice and straight. You can put your hand on your belly to feel it. Big breath in, blow out, hold your breath for a second. Now I want you to think and concentrate, pulling that belly button muscle up into your rib cage. For females, remember Kegel's exercises, that squeezing the pelvic floor muscle. For the men, it's when you give a urine sample to the doctor, he usually tells you to pee a little bit, hold your pee mid-flow before you pee in the cup for the sample. It's that holding contraction. Once you've got that, breathe and hold that for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release. Couple things. The reason I make you hold your breath, I don't want to see one of these, because when you do that, it naturally sucks your belly in. You want the muscles to do it. And the reason why people ask me, why do you tell me to contract my pelvic muscles? Because the nerve that sends innervation to the pelvic floor muscles also innervates this abdominal muscle. So the theory is if you're weak in your abdominal muscle, which a lot of us are, if you have poor back pain, then in theory, activating part of a muscle that you already can control will help you get that other section, okay? So you're activating your abdominal muscles, lifting with your legs and keeping the load close to you. So that's kind of your power position. So as you can see in the first two is correct, back straight, bending at the knees and the hips. The last two, not so good. There's no bend in his knees. It's all in the back, plus it's worse, he's got a load. And then definitely she does not watch any J-lo videos because she's got no butt out there. So, she would have had her back straight and her butt out. So always the guidelines for good biomechanics, know the situation before you begin lifting something. You want to know how heavy it is so you can get that help. Check the care plan, face your work area, nice wide base support, hip and knee bend. So there's your J-los, tighten your abdominal muscle and keep your back straight. We really want to make sure to keep loads close to you and try to avoid that unnecessary bending and reaching. So raising the bed, arranging equipment close to you and turn your body as a whole. So this is why I want you to keep objects close to you. You think 2-pound water bottle, no biggie. I hold it against my body, 2 pounds of force. But if I now reach forward and lean and hold that water bottle outstretched, I will feel it more in my spine, almost 200 pounds of force more. Why? It's just physics, just the longer lever arm. So now you think of your 135-pound resident, not heavy, but you're lifting, you're transferring, you're kind of outstretched. You could be exhibiting 1,350 pounds of force in your spine for one maneuver, for one resident, multiplied by how many times you're doing that. So as I said, repetition, making small changes, not about perfection, it's about progression. So trying to make these small changes. So nice, smooth, even movements. Pushing, you already told me, is better than pulling. And this is key. If a person falls, do we stop the fall? I think most of us probably know, right? And you'd be correct. What did I say earlier? Maximal lifting policy that anybody can lift is 35 pounds. I don't think we have any residents that only weigh 35 pounds. That'd be pretty scary. So the most you can do is, again, tighten your abdominal muscles and try to help slowly lower them down. Maybe protect the head, move objects out of the way. Because if you're like, you're going to try to stop them and hold them, you're grabbing for their arm, they're going to go down, you just dislocated the shoulder. You're just at more risk for injuring yourself and the resident when you're trying to react suddenly versus trying to help slowly lower them down. And then obviously once they're down, we don't move them until we call the registered nurse to do the head to toe assessment. So that's just my quick spiel on that. I'm going to show you really quickly some stretches that you can do in your break time. Don't feel it's rushed. You do have these in your handouts. So my main pet peeve is when I hear people do stretches for like 5-10 seconds, does nothing. You would think of a rubber band. You want to hold a rubber band out for at least a good length of time. And then when you let go of it, it stays nice and lengthened, stretched. That's what you want. So minimum 20 to 30 seconds, no bouncing. Always start with a good, nice warm up, maybe some squats, arm circles, or take the stairs a couple times, and then just to get your muscles warmed. So this is a really nice one for neck tension. A lot of us have this, especially with all these Zoom meetings. You get tensions that goes from the base of the neck to the upper shoulder area. Can also trigger headaches if they get really tight. So which side am I more tight today? So my right side. So if I'm going to tight on my right hand side, I'm going to bring my left ear to my left shoulder. Feel free to join me. Take your left hand and kind of pull it closer to your left ear to shoulder. Let your right hand just kind of hang down, or you can even sit on it. And you should feel a really nice elongated stretch on the base of the neck into the upper back. And you're going to hold that for 20 seconds. I've been talking for at least 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. You can gently let go. Another alternate version of this is actually to turn your head slightly to face the same armpit. That's another, gets a little bit deeper into the back of the muscles there. And then you just gently come off of that. And I always recommend you want to balance out, do the other side. So about 2 to 3 repetitions each side, 2 or 3 times throughout the day, depending how tight you are. Another good one's the upper torso stretch. So hands together, really reaching forward. And that helps to stretch the forearms, which is great for all the computer work that we're doing, the upper arms and the upper back. This is a really good one for the chest stretch. So that first one I taught you in the previous section about posture, remember the chin tuck, shoulders down and back. If you're tight, which most of us are, that one automatically, you should feel that stretch in the pecs. You add behind the back and looking straight ahead. That's a really good stretch for those tight chest area. A lot of people get really tight just because of our naturally rounded shoulders. Well, not natural, sorry, our habitually naturally rounded shoulders. So the triceps is the back of the arm. So letting it hang down, using your other hand to kind of pull it towards the midline, and that stretch the back of the forearm. I do have patients who, like I treat a lot of patients with frozen shoulders and stuff. They can't get that high with the other hand. So then we modify it. You take a towel, you hold it with the top hand, the bottom hand, you hold it and you pull down with the bottom hand, and that will help stretch the top hand. Bicep stretch for the front part of the shoulder. So reaching behind you to a door or a wall and gently turn your body away will give a nice stretch to the front part of your shoulder capsule. This is really good for the rotator cuff tendons or smaller tendons that kind of basically, like your hip, is your shoulder's a ball and socket. It attaches to the ball and keeps it within the socket. So your bigger deltoid muscle can do all the big movements. But you always hear about rotator cuff strains and tears, right? So you want to make sure they stay nice and flexible. So this one really makes sure that you're nice open chest area so that you're not pinching on those tendons. Bring the arm across, use your other hand underneath to kind of add that overpressure. Thumbs up will stretch one set of rotator cuff muscle. Thumbs down will stretch the second set of rotator cuff muscles. And then this is really good for that, those golfers, elbow, tennis elbow I told you about, the forearm. So arm outstretched, you can use your other hand to kind of pull your fingers towards you, that you're stretching that front part of that wrist. And then the other way, getting down and using your hand to add that bit of overpressure can help stretch the dorsum, which is very common for tennis elbow. And then the standing, this will love this after long drives. If you've been sitting down after these meetings, stand up and really reach up, 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 help open up the space between the joints and stretch all your erector spinae muscles. This is good for your pelvis. So your pelvis, it is attached to your spine, right? So your spine attaches to the back of the pelvis. So when your pelvis is tight, force is going to go where force is going to go. It's going to go up to your spine. So you want to have a nice flexible pelvis. So in position A, you can see she's dropping into, we call it an anterior pelvic tilt. She's getting her stomach to sink down, looking up. So kind of getting that C curve in her spine. And then she's doing the opposite, where she's now tilting her pelvis towards the ceiling. And so really trying to get a good flexibility in that pelvic floor area. Again, two joint muscles are your quads or saps. So that attaches the front part of the thigh into the knee. So if it's tight, it will pull on your pelvis, which will then translate to extra force on your spine. So you want to have flexible legs. So you can either do this standing, or you can do it on your side, lying down, or on your stomach. Tie a belt around your ankle if you can't reach for it, and then just pull on that belt, and that will approximate your heel towards your buttocks. And then the back of the leg is very tight for like 99% of us. And so you can see in position B, he's got a great J-lo there, like butt out, nice straight back. And he's stretching the first leg. And you can do this while you're waiting for the elevators. I've taught this to all your new staff, so everybody should see people doing this while you're waiting. Nobody should be surprised. And so you can do this even sitting up. Sit up nice and tall right now. Join me, get one leg straight, point your toes towards your head, and I'm sure you'll feel it in the back of the thigh into the calf. It's a good 20 to 30 second count. Like I literally have stretch patients on my table doing this just for 20 minutes, and they can walk out feeling much relief for their spine because they've been so tight. So reaching up for the sky to the side as well. So that's my little thing on stretches. So transfers, again, it's the register staff, your nurses or your physio or OT who will determine the status, but you should still, each one of us, it's a point of care risk assessment. When we're in front of that resident, how are they right now? And so obviously your register staff will make the most consistent, safe, efficient method, and we can always move up from there, and I'll show you that later on. But basically, we want to make sure, is it still safe? Does it match? So this is your 4-prong approach. Number one, you check the care plan. So you know that if it's a 2-person, you're not doing it by yourself. You're getting that second person in. So what is the mobility status? Do you have everything set up? Are there brakes on the bed, brakes on the wheelchair, brakes on the chair? How are you? Do you remember your body mechanics, your JLOs, your tummy tucks? And then how's the resident? So number one, address their care needs first. If they're in pain, you might talk to the nurse and come back when the pain is more managed. And then how is their cognition? So if they can't follow directions, they're delirious, they got a UTI, and they're just not following coherent directions, then I'm not going to get them up manually anyway. I might have to use mechanical lift. And then, because it's not safe. If they pass that, great. My second step is I'm going to go to number 3. So let's say I find them on the bed. Simple test. I'm going to get them to do a bridge. So I'm going to say, Mr. Jones, can you plant your feet on the floor on the bed? Can you try to lift your bum up and do a bridge? So I can, fix the slider sheet. If they can do that and hold it up for a good few seconds, that's perfect. But if they really have difficulty holding it and they can't keep it up and it keeps dropping down, I'm not going to stand them up. Why? I need that butt muscle to stand. That's what kicks in and keeps you in that standing position. So if they can't even lift off gravity, that tells me they're not ready to do the standing. If they can pass that, perfect. I'm going to get them to turn and sit up. Once they're sitting, I see, can they hold that position? Because if they're constantly leaning, I have to hold them, then no, I'm not going to stand them up. It's not safe. If they can do that, perfect. Can they at least get 2 legs straight or 1 leg straight? At least 1 leg to weight bear on. Like 5-10 degree knee flexion contraction, not a biggie, but you want them at least to be able to stand on it. Okay. And then once they're standing, obviously make sure there's no dizziness, double vision, but then can they take a few steps just to march on the spot? If they're kind of stuck and they can't even move their feet, now I know I can't do a manual transfer. It's going to have to be a sit to stand lift minimum. Okay. So that's kind of your 4-prong approach. So if you can't do care safely right now, then you can always go upgrade. You can go from 1-person to 2-person, ask for that second help, or go to a mechanical device. If you're not sure, always ask your registered nurse or staff to come and assist. And if something was changed, make sure it's communicated to the next shifts. So again, if you've answered no to any of those questions of following directions, being able to bridge or sit unsupported or get 1 leg straight, no manual transfer. It will have to be some type of mechanical. So whatever down, always ask for help and don't forget to put the brakes on things. How many times have we seen residents try to pull up on walkers, and I'll talk about that later, and the brakes aren't on, they pop a wheelie and have a fall. So really important to make sure all the brakes are on. So the independent transfer means the resident can pretty much go without any supervision, with or without gait aids. Supervised transfer means they can do most of it as well, but they still need us there for minimal cueing or for either verbal or physical, but you still want to be in front of them and beside them. You don't want to be at the door, they're in the room, you need to be right beside them. That's what supervision is. 1-person pivot. So again, they're a little bit more unstable, so you maybe need to support their weaker leg with your strong leg. They can still do all those manual checks though. So they have the weight bearing status, trunk control, and all of that. But now you have a weaker side possibly. So you're always going to want to pivot to their stronger side. This is the key. So if your resident was weak on the left-hand side, I'm going to put the wheelchair on the right-hand side so they can use their stronger leg to help pivot. 2-person pivot, same as 1-person, but maybe a bit more unstable. So you've got the caregiver in the back holding the pelvis and the one in the front. Don't have too many cooks in the kitchen. So please only have the caregiver in the front doing most of the directions, or you're going to have a ping pong conversation, like you confuse your resident. And with a walker transfer, this is key because it happens all the time. I've seen it so many times. How many times do you see residents take the walker and pull up from it to stand up? And then when they sit down, they leave their hands there and they just kind of flop down. Now, I heard of a resident almost actually broke a toilet bowl, not in any of your homes, in another home in Kingston, because they crashed down and they were so heavy. And they were heavy and it was just a really fast descent. So obviously don't want that to happen. So a couple of things. We want to get a resident up to stand. You already told me it's better to push versus pull. Same thing with this. Why? Because if, as I said, they're going to pull up from there, The brakes might be loose, they might be broken, or they might not be put on. And how many times have you seen caregivers do one of these, ram down on the walker as the resident's pulling up? That's not efficient for either of them. So the thing is, you want the resident to scoot to the edge of the chair. It's hard to get up if your bum's all the way in the back. So have them at the edge of the chair, feet slid behind the angle of the knees. And this is key. We always tell them nose over toes, but push up from the chair, push up from the bed, push up from the commode, and then reach for the walker. If they have a visual impairment, I might let them have one hand on the walker just to know where they're going to stand up to, but it's the hand that's pushing that's getting them up. And the same thing when they sit back down. We always say reach for the chair, but don't let them go down. You just tell them to stop. They need to reach for the chair, reach for the bed. And when they do that, it automatically puts them in the hip hinge, and it will help slowly control their descent down. Okay, so that's key. Stand lift, as I said, these are for people who can stand up but cannot pivot. But again, the other requirement, they cannot be fully hemipresis on the upper body. They have to have enough upper body strength to hold on to the bar. Because if they don't, if you put somebody who's completely flaccid on one side, that harness is going to dig into their armpit repeatedly and will cause pain and over time. And then obviously total mechanical lift for people who have no weight bearing status, or they can weight bear, but they're too cognitively impaired to follow directions and it's an unsafe transfer. We don't have transfer belts, and you might have slider boards. So think of like an amputee, good upper body strength, good trunk control, but just cannot stand up and pivot. So you have the bed and the chair angled at 45 degrees, remove the armrest, footrest, and they basically slide down. So with body positioning, this is what I meant. This is your power position. Get the resident to as close to the edge as safe, feet slid behind the angle, need to give them that extra push forward as they go nose over toes and stand up. Okay. And then the key thing about the two-person is we don't want to do this. Please don't hook up under the armpit and lift them up, because again, repeatedly that will cause pain. Okay, instead, what we should be doing, all those techniques of getting them to push up if they can. Otherwise, have their hand on your forearm, your hand around their pelvis, same thing with your partner, and that way you're gripping on from there and getting them up. Or if you feel you still need to hold on, I would face my resident, I would hold on to their forearm. My other hand would be pushing their elbow in towards their body, and then I'm holding them as I'm going up with them. So that I still feel that control, but I'm not jamming up into their armpit. Okay. And then never have a one-person pivot around your neck. Please don't, we don't want any choking incidents. It should be around your pelvis area. And then in this position, who's doing all the work here? I know we're taught this, you hook under the legs, you go under the shoulder blades and you do one of those maneuvers, but it's the PSW or the nurse doing all the work. And how many times are they doing that? It's hard for your back. So as much as you can, you try to get your resident involved if they can. Not always the case, but usually get them to turn to their weaker side. So their sideline, then you can get them to bring one leg down and then the other leg, or you help them. And then you just concentrate on the top half. We'll be nice. We'll raise the head of the bed, right? And you encourage them with their top hand to kind of push against the bed as they kind of walk themselves up with their bottom elbow digging in. If you need to support them, you support them. You face them, your hand on their top pelvis, now your hand under their bottom shoulder blade. And as you're teaching them to push up, you're adding that momentum, not lifting them, but just kind of getting them going. Okay. So the last couple of things about the Rojo cushions. So Rojo cushions are dry air-filled pockets that mimic water. So when you sit on the cushion, it kind of lifts you up. And you don't see it because you'll have these little pockets, but they're covered by a cushion, but you can feel it. So you want to make sure, this is key, that you feel the cushion, because you can tell the difference between the nice soft cushions versus the hard slat. Because on the bottom side of that cushion is a hard board typically. And I know it sounds funny, but I've heard of people develop pressure ulcers because after a weekend of being sitting in the wheelchair, a staff member discovered that the cushion was upside down the whole weekend. So we don't want that to happen. It's a simple check. You can just put your hands together like a butterfly or like the bottom of a butt, and you just push down on the cushion. If you go all the way to the bottom, that's not a good sign. That says it's not inflated enough. If you don't feel the bottom, at least you know it's enough air to get started. Okay, so then you get the resident sitting in it properly. Right? And then you do the wiggle test, because again, my body shape and size is different from Sonia's, is different from Sarah's, is different from Christine's, everybody. So I need the resident situated properly, and I'm going to tell them, Mr. Jones, I'm going to just put my hand on your butt on top of the cushion and do the wiggle test. Okay, on the bony part, that ischial tuberosity, you want to try to get there as you can. And if you can wiggle more than 1 inch, it's saying, woo, there's not enough air in here. I have all this room to wiggle. So what does that mean? At the end of the day, the resident's going to bottom out. There's no support lifting them up. And if it's too overinflated that you can't even budge 1/2 inch, that's not good either, because you've just lost that water ebb and flow property. So it's not pressure relief. So you want that good 1/2 inch to 1 inch cushion. Every nursing station has the Rojo pump and instruction manual in case you forget. Also at every nursing station is the repair binder from Motion Specialties, who happens to be your preferred equipment vendor. They come in once a week and they do all the repairs. So that's key. Please do not put any broken chairs with residents. We don't want them to have any accidents. So if anything's broken, write in those repair books. If you can't wait for the next weekly cycle, let your registered nurse know so they can call and email, and maybe they can come in sooner versus later, provide a loaner. The second important note is always please make sure the footrests are placed down before you move a resident. So why do people not have footrests? Well, it's normal and it's good. It means that they are self-propellers. We want that. We want them to be able to reduce that responsive behavior and have that independence. It reduces the risk of falls if they try to do unsafe self-transfers, right? So they're not tripping over something. But if they say, you know what, I'm too tired to push myself, Sarah, can you please, give me a push? We don't say, okay, Mr. Jones, lift your feet up. I'm going to push you the rest of the way. Why? Because he could drop his feet suddenly. We keep going. We're not expecting it. We've just fractured his foot. And that exactly happened at one of the York homes. Other incidents I've heard of, if it stops suddenly, you might jolt your own back, right? And then I've heard of residents fall forward and come off the chair. So we don't want to, we want to avoid all of that. So what York Region has done really, really well, which all homes are not doing, we're trying to promote them to do, is they have bags at the back of the wheelchairs. So that excuse that I can't find the footrest is no longer there. So the footrest should always be with the chair at the back if they're using them. And then once you need to transport them, you put them back down and then you transport them at nice slow speed. And then once we're done, we remove the footrest and put them back in the bags. Because if you don't remove them and then you leave your resident there and they don't know how to remove it, you've just restrained them. And they could try to get up and forget that it's there and have a fall, or now they can't even move. And so a restraint needs a doctor's order, consent, and care plan, which you don't have if you haven't advised that. So don't leave it there either. Okay. So we don't want to transport them without the footrest. We don't want to just swing the footrest aside because that can get caught on things. You actually want to remove it and put it in those bags. Okay, because we want to avoid obviously injury and obviously litigation, stuff like that. Okay, so again, if residents and family may refuse to, some of them feel like, oh, if you start using the footrest, my family member will never be independent again. It's explained to them that no, it's just for when I need to transport them. But if they still refuse after all that education, let your registered nurse know so you can write it down in the progress notes. Okay, any questions? Hopefully no injuries. And welcome back and welcome to new ones, and hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thanks, Anya. See you next week.
See you. All right. Lots of info, eh? I wasn't lying when I said it's a lot of info, but hey, you're still awake and most part, you're still smiling, so it's all good. She gives some pretty good info. The next bit is the surge learning. I want to show you that. So when you go, it's not linked to a York Region account, or you don't have to have a York Region email or anything like that. If you go to Google and search surge learning login, it'll populate this page. We just want to click on the first one and you'll arrive at a page that looks like this on your browser. You could do it on your phone. You can do it on an iPad or a laptop. You'll arrive at your page that looks like this. Here we'll be using the site code, this one, and the password, and sign in. Okay, your information to sign in. I find the best way to do this is to just take a snap or jot it down, the one that's for you, with your username and your password. The passwords are all generic to say York 123. I don't think anybody's busting in to complete anybody else's education. So I think it's fair to say that we're okay to share our passwords, but your username is unique to you. All right, so I'll give you an example. Let's go with Anusha. I'll put yours in.
Sorry,
Oh,
can
sorry.
you repeat the
Sorry,
website?
I'm not. Am I showing? I'm not even showing you my screen. Come
No,
on.
that's what I was thinking. That I thought that you'll be showing us later on.
No, I'm moving, and I didn't even show you. Oh, and it was so good too. Hold on.
Surge learning. Okay.
Yeah. So when you go to Google, you type in. I thought you were seeing all of this. That's why I'm rambling on. I'm so sorry. Surge learning login brings you to a page that looks like this. You click on this one for surge learning. you'll arrive at an orange page that looks like this. In the orange page, we're going to be using the site code. We'll put in your site code and password, and and then you click on sign in. Okay. This one shows you, see, somebody needs to call me out when I'm talking crazy. So this is all your usernames and passwords. What I was saying is everybody will be generic at York123 for your password, but your username will be unique. So you can just take a snap or jot it down, however it's easiest for you. I'll take Anusha's and put it in so that you see what it's like when we log in. So when you log in, this is the page that you'll see. Don't let it scare you with the number of courses. Some of them are policies, some of them are a minute, some are 2 minutes. It's just, it itemizes all of them. So it does look overwhelming. It has to be done. Unfortunately, the industry that we're in is so heavily regulated and legislated that we need to complete all of the courses. When you go into here, a little bit about Surge. The course library is basically like walking into a library. You can learn any topic. These aren't all the ones that are assigned to you, but you can go in and say you wanted to learn something about cultural competence and Indigenous cultural safety. You can go in and take those modules. Here it'll, when you expand the plus sign, it gives you the names of the courses, and over here it'll tell you the amount of time it'll take to go through the course. That you can do for self-interest. What you need to do is the ones that are under my courses or from the home page, you'll see this icon, which is my courses. When you click on that, it'll populate the courses that are under your profile for completion. The ones for today that we need to complete, and like I said, you'll receive credit for the LifeMark transferring wheelchair and portering, because that's the one that Sarah just went over. So you can ignore that one. The missions, visions, values, you can ignore that one. The Long-Term Care Homes Act is the one that Marion went over, so you can ignore that one. Basically, the ones that are listed on the agenda that we covered this morning, you can omit because you will receive the credits for that one. Sunny will be going over the emergency codes and fire safety. The ones I need you to complete today are these 3, because I'll show you plan of care right now. But these 3, the pleasurable dining, best practice, and they're listed in yellow on the second page of your agenda that's attached to your Zoom link. But it's this pleasurable dining best practices. It's 16 minutes. The resident abuse and neglect is 24 minutes. And dementia care and responsive behavior is 16 minutes. Super important that you complete these 3 today, because that's how you'll get scheduled for you to be able to come into the home. So those were the 2 pieces that we needed to complete. The balance of your 7 needs to be completed within 7 days. For those that won't be joining me back at 2 o'clock, you have 3 hours after lunch that you can start knocking these off, and then you'll only have 1 at 45 minutes to complete within the 7 days. Okay. So let me go in and show you that plan of care. So the plan of care, because it's a condensed orientation, because of COVID, we had to condense our orientation for long-term care. So everybody receives like an across the board, all of the items that we have to cover within the Long-Term Cares Homes Act. So it kind of sucks, and it's kind of a good thing because you're getting a lot of information, but in that it might not be role specific, but you have to complete it. Okay. So plan of care looks like this. Whenever you go into any course on Surge, you'll see it as a course. For the ones that have parts to them, if they have 4 parts, you'll see it listed here. I'll go into one and show you what I mean. But for plan of care, for example, this is a 35-second course. You look at it, the licensee shall ensure that the care plan is set out and provided for the resident as specified in the plan of care. Licensee shall ensure that the resident is reassessed and the plan of care is reviewed revised at least every 6 months or on any other time when a goal is met, the resident's care needs change, or the care as set out is no longer necessary. So anytime there's a change in condition or a resident was walking and now they're not able to walk, we need to adjust that care plan. If you can't do that as an individual, you can let your nurse know and they can make those adjustments on the resident's plan of care. But remember when I was mentioning that piece about being part of the interdisciplinary team? So if you know a piece of information, then we all put it together to compile this care plan. If you're a PSW, you find the care plan when you sign in to do your documentation and you click on care plan, that's where you find the care plan. If you're a nurse, the care plan is located in your charting on this tab. PSW can view the resident's plan of care and point of care, that is correct. And a nurse can view the resident's care plan in point-click care. So those are the two different databases that the nurse uses to document versus the PSW. When you finish a course, you click this blue button here that says, I have completed this course. When you click on there, it'll say, I have completed this education and understand the content, or I have completed this education and have a question. So you can click either box, and then some of them ask you for your password. So here we're going to use the York 123 again and submit. And that check mark means you're done. You see it has a course completion date and time on your profile. That means you're done. If there was a test, it would populate the test. The one I wanted to show you that has parts to it so that you're not confused when you go in. Section. So this one is called, this is what you'll call a bundled course. It has 4 parts to it. So here, whenever it has, see this says it contains 4 modules. So you have the course, then you have the test. Only after you've taken the course and the test will the next portion of the course open up. It doesn't open up all 4. It'll go from course to test, course to test, course to test, and follow that pattern with the module. So you just got to be aware of that, because then you'll be, how come it's not letting me go to part 4? Well, you got to finish part 1 before you can move on to part 4. Any questions on those? Clear? Go ahead.
Did they all have tests for
No.
the 3 that we're doing today, the pleasurable dining?
No, I don't believe they all have tests. And the tests are not terribly difficult. You listen to the content and you'll be able to do it. I have complete confidence in you.
Okay.
All right. You'll all receive the credit for the plan of care, so you don't have to worry about that one. That's why I went over that one with you.
Okay.
So the 3 that you'll have left are the pleasurable dining best practices, the resident abuse and neglect, and dementia care and responsive behavior. Like I said, ideally, even the Sarah, I know you're coming back with me at 2, but you should have enough time to finish that by 4:30. It's kind of like, it's tight, right? But if we get it done, then you don't have anything to worry about with coming in tomorrow. And yeah, you might have, Suzanne, you might have 1 left over. I would leave out the PHIPAA LTC training, maybe, because that one's 45 minutes. So you'll have 3 hours. You have an hour for lunch from 12:30 to 1:30. So you'll still have 3 hours that you can complete as much as possible on the agenda. Once you finish the ones that are listed on the agenda, there will be other ones there, because there's no way we can cover off everything in this one day. So the balance of those do have to be completed by no later than December 3rd. So I would just advise to keep knocking them off if you can. Or if you have a training day that you're assigned to come in, take some of that time to work on your modules. All right. If we have any questions on Surge, I can go over those after Sunny's presentation, and I'll hand it over to Sunny Claire. She'll go over emergency codes and fire safety. Hi, Sunny.
Hi, everyone.
You have an RPN and a PSW coming to you at Maple in the rapid testing and screening area. Sarah is an activationist new employee at Newmarket. Suzanne Duffy is administrative clerk coming into Newmarket. And Roberto Ramiro is an environmental staff member returning at the Newmarket Health Center.
Great. Well, thank you, Sonia. Hi, everyone. My name is Sunny Claire. As Sonia just mentioned, I'm the emergency and contingency planning specialist. I've been with the region now for just shy of 7 months. So I will be providing you guys a high-level overview. And for some of you, it might be just a refresher on the emergency codes. So it is only 30 minutes, so it is very brief, but please know that there will be additional training in the homes that you will participate in, where you'll have the opportunity to do some practicum training as well. So I'm going to get started. If any questions do come up, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask them, or you can just put the questions in the chat or send them over to Sonia and she can share them with me afterwards. So I'm going to get started. It's just easier for me to turn off my camera when I'm talking here. An emergency code is a code word to identify a problem in the home. And on the right-hand side is a list of the emergency codes that I'll be talking about today, minus gray. The gray one we're still working on in terms of developing a policy, but the other codes are in effect or they're active. So I'll be focusing on those. When you hear a code in the home, it means a set of actions need to take place immediately, like help is required. It's also an activation of the Senior Services Emergency Plan. Code blue means medical emergency. And this can impact anyone. It could be a staff member, visitor, or resident. And if you come across anyone having a medical emergency, it's very important that you stay with them until help arrives. It's also very important if they are, say they're slumping in a chair, try to make them as comfortable as you possibly can. And the main takeaway for this is to stay with them until help arrives. If they are a resident, there's something called advanced directive that the RPNs will take a look at. And this indicates if the individual is to receive a medical assistance or not, in a nutshell. So if there's no advanced directive, staff are to call 911, start CPR, and use medical equipment if required. If it's a family member, staff, or visitor, you would call 911, start CPR, and use medical equipment if required. So really that's the takeaway, is the advanced directive versus non-advanced directive. And regardless of what your role is in the home, if you come across anyone, stay with them until help arrives. Code green means evacuate. And this code can be called for a number of reasons. One example can be, there's an internal emergency, perhaps like a bomb threat, for example, like worst case scenario, and the police say you need to evacuate the building. So that's one example where the charge nurse might call this code, or management. And when you are evacuating the home, you are to follow fire procedures. And what that really means is, or essentially what that means is, you would evacuate the residence and exit through the nearest fire doors. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I get into fire safety. And you continue to listen to announcements and follow directions as needed. Part of the evacuation process is closing doors and marking them vacant once you have evacuated the residence. So this is an example of a room tag that you will see on all the doors inside the home, including the program areas. On the left-hand side, in this position, that means it's occupied, or it's just a resting position, like, for example, a storage room or a washroom, it would be in this position. During an emergency, when you are evacuating residents and evacuating the home or the home area, you close the door And once you check it and remove the resident, you put it in the vacant position, which is on the right-hand side. And this is very important in an emergency, because when the fire department or emergency personnel show up, they need to know which rooms are still occupied. And again, it's important to check the washrooms and the storage rooms as well, not just the resident rooms. Because a staff member might have gone in there to take a little break or get on a phone call, like you never know. In my experience, I've seen staff do that. They'll just go into like an area, just, you know, maybe it's their designated break area. So you want to double check those as well. Code orange means shelter in place. And I'll give you an example. There were a couple of tornado warnings in the region of York. And if those materialized, that may have triggered a code orange. So something's happening in the community or weather related, and staff are given a heads up that, hey, there's a tornado that might hit and everyone in the home should just be prepared. And if a code orange is called, you are to move the residents to a safe location. So this includes moving them away from external glass and putting them into the hallways. So this is one example. Maple Health Center is surrounded by external glass, especially in the program area and the screening area, whereas Newmarket Health Center, the screening area, it's not surrounded by external glass, but there's other areas that are. So it's important to keep that in mind. Does somebody have a question? Or maybe that was just some feedback. Okay. So that's the key, right? You're moving them away, and that includes their rooms, because in their rooms, right behind them is external glass. So it's important we move them away. And I think since I've started, they did go through code orange in one of the homes, and they were just preparing in case a tornado did hit. I think it was both Newmarket and Maple, and they were moving residents to like the dining room areas, just away from the external glass. At the adult day program, they gave me an example of moving the residents to the washrooms. Right, so that's another example. You continue to stay with the residents to make sure they're not alone. And activities of daily living will continue, such as bathroom and dining. But the main takeaway is you're continuing to listen to announcements and follow instructions in case the situation escalates. So, you know, it could become extreme, right? Like the weather is getting worse and now we need to move to another location. So that's something to keep in mind. Code yellow means missing resident. And there's two stages I'm going to talk about here. The first stage is you want to look for the resident in the home area first, and look in the areas that they would frequent, such as the dining room area. Perhaps there's a friend that they like to visit in their home area, so check there. Check the sign-in sheet. I've seen some residents, they like to go to the nursing station sometimes just to, you know, talk to the staff there. So check those areas first. Check the sign-in sheet. Perhaps they met with their family and you weren't aware of it, or the staff are not aware. So maybe just double check that. Notify the family. Perhaps the family might know something. So that's one area, one stage. If that fails, the second stage is the entire building can be involved in locating the resident. So a picture of the resident is shared, and a search kit, which is located in the nursing station, is used. In worst case scenarios, 911 may need to be called, just in case the resident has now wandered off the property. I'm going to pause here because I know I've been speaking very fast. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
No.
Okay. Code white means aggressive or violent person. And I'm not going to read this word for word, but really the takeaway for this slide is keep an eye on signs of escalation. So if you see someone that is typically very calm, quiet. And then today, their behavior is different and potentially becoming more aggressive. That's something you want to keep an eye on, because perhaps their needs are not being met and they're getting angry. So this is pertaining to like a resident, but equally it's important to keep an eye on visitors, because in the homes, there's a lot of visitors that come in and out, including contracted staff. So it's important to keep an eye on who's coming in the home area. And if there's a threat to your safety and the safety of residents, that's what you want to keep an eye on and ask for help if needed. This information has been pulled from the GPA training. So these are strategies that you can use when dealing with escalating behavior. One example or strategy that staff have told me that works really well is a stop and go. Meaning, if it's a resident, you want to check in on them. If they are, yelling at you, for example, perhaps just like giving them some space, but keeping an eye on them from afar and coming back and checking in on them. Sometimes giving them that space allows them to, come down from what they're feeling. So that's one strategy. The other strategy is stay back 1 meter in case the person is becoming physical. And unfortunately, there are examples of when staff have been physically hurt by residents, right? So that's one example. And the same can be said with visitors. If a visitor is showing aggressive signs and you feel your safety is compromised, stay back. Don't make sure that, there's space between you and that individual, and go ask for help. There's no harm in asking for help, especially if you're just not sure if the behavior is escalating. Perhaps there's another staff member in the home that knows this individual or has a better, when I say better, I mean perhaps they know the resident a little bit more, so they can assist with speaking to the resident. So it's important to also be aware of the profiles of the residents, right? What languages they speak, what are their needs? Does somebody have cognitive, challenges? So things like that, it's important to be aware of those, especially the language one. I know at Maple, for example, there's a lot of residents that speak Italian, and perhaps they're saying something to you and you're like, oh, I don't know what they're saying. They're angry, but maybe they're just trying to explain something in their language. And then you can ask another staff member to come and speak to them in their language. Code black means bomb threat. And a bomb threat can be a phone call, or it could be like a suspicious package. And the suspicious package one is a little bit tricky because sometimes it's not very clear what is suspicious or not. But the main thing to keep an eye out for in regards to that is typically like Canada Post or FedEx, they have a uniform on, right? So if somebody's dropping off a package, but they don't have a uniform, they don't have a name tag, that's something you want to keep an eye out for. But I know in my experience, the homes do have a really good process in receiving packages. So, but if you see someone just walking in a home area, dropping off a package, that might be a little bit suspicious. Somebody could be calling in and making a prank when they're making the bomb threat, which, in schools, it happens quite a lot. And I know in some offices it's happened as well. It can happen in a long-term care home, but we have to take it seriously, right? Because it's your safety and the safety of residents that can be compromised. So we would direct, so if you're taking the phone call, ask another person to call 911, notify management, and follow the direction of the police. The police may tell you to evacuate the home. And if that's the case, then you would follow the evacuation procedures. And I'm going to talk about evacuation procedures. I believe it's next. Yes. So long-term care, fire safety. I want to spend some time on this slide because this is a poster that was developed with communications, and it's just a visual reminder to staff in terms of what to do if they see smoke or fire in their home area. So if you see smoke or fire, like you visually see it, you want to remove the residents in immediate danger of the fire or smoke first. And it's really important to keep in mind that you do these steps only if it's safe to do so. So if it's like safe for you to move forward to get the residents out of that room, do it. If not, then evacuate further away. Ensure the fire is contained by closing all the doors and marking the doors vacant. And this I went through with you guys in terms of the room tag. So this is where it becomes very essential to evacuate residents, close the doors, mark the doors vacant. Because the fire department will arrive on site and they will need to know if there's any residents still in the rooms or if there's any staff still in the rooms, so they can assist with further evacuation. You want to activate the nearest fire alarm by pulling down the lever on the nearest pull station. And then make the code red announcement. Announcements, I'll talk about roles and responsibilities. Announcements can be made by any staff member. However, the charge nurse is responsible to make it if no one has made it. But I encourage all of you guys to make it if you see fire or smoke, or if you come across an emergency situation. Try to extinguish the fire if you are trained and if it is safe to do so. In conversation with the fire department, when we were talking about REACT and the procedures in the homes, they said the main thing for staff to keep in mind is to evacuate as safely and quickly as possible. So I know there's something called a triangle method, part of our fire safety plan. That's just really essentially, something to keep in mind. If there's a fire, remove the residents in the nearest vicinity of the fire. That's really what it means. Things you should know when you are assigned to your home area, which I believe each of you will be because the home is cohorting the staff. Please walk around and become familiar with the exits and the pull stations, fire extinguishers, where they're located, and something just to share with you all, there's something called the annunciator panel located inside the nursing stations. They're also located in the basement and usually in the lobby of the homes. And this basically is a list. It's a board with a list of the zones in the homes, and it lights up to indicate where the fire or smoke is coming from. And the fire department will take a look at the annunciator panel to locate the location, but it's also important for the charge nurse to be aware of this in case there is an emergency where there's a fire. They can check the annunciator panel to make the announcement. So roles and responsibilities. The charge nurse guides the evacuation. So in emergency management, we use the term takes command. It really means a person leading the evacuation. And if they are providing instructions, please follow them, as we want to make sure that staff and residents are safe. They also ensure that the code red announcement has been made and 911 has been called. They also do a sweep of the area to ensure residents have been evacuated and residents are accounted for and kept safe. So it's a lot of responsibility on the charge nurse, but it is a team effort. So make sure that when you are in a situation where the safety of yourselves and the residents are impacted, please work together as a team. There is a runner that's assigned at the home, and this is typically a PSW, and their role is to set the elevator and meet emergency personnel at the entrance and guide them to the location of the fire. The runner can take on any other role as required, such as helping with further evacuation or calling 911. All staff, again, you wait for further direction unless you are in the fire zone. So when I say fire zone means like areas. And the fire zones are listed on each fire door. The fire doors are the exit doors in the home area. So when you're walking around, you can just look and see what the zone is in your home areas. If you are with residents, you should wait with them until further direction. So never leave the residents alone. And if you are in the fire zone, you should react. And react is the poster that I just discussed in terms of the steps. And again, communication is really crucial in any emergency. So continue to listen for announcements. And if you hear management or the charge nurse come into your area and say, hey, we need all hands on deck, I need your help, please do follow directions. So these are just some visuals that I'll talk about in regards to fire systems. The homes are equipped with really good fire equipment. And this is from my own experience in inspecting, buildings and whatnot, but also working with the fire department. They have said this as well, that the homes are equipped with really good systems. So it's important to be aware of what they are. On the left-hand side is a heat and smoke detector, which will pick up the heat and smoke and trigger the alarm. And beside it is the pull station. There's typically like a clear plastic cover that's placed on it, and you would just lift it and then pull the alarm. On the right-hand side is the fire doors. Again, these are located by the exits, and when the fire alarm is triggered, they would unlock. Each door in the home will unlock. So it's important to be aware of that. And you walk through the nearest fire doors. Make sure you never prop them open because they are meant to contain the fire. This slide is, I'm not going to read it word for word, but really it's about control of hazards. Keep your program areas clear of any hazards or anything that might prevent you from moving safely and quickly from your home area in an emergency, and being aware of the smoking, electrical, and housekeeping policies. It's also important for residents, right? When there's a lot of residents on, like, say, floor 2 at Newmarket that wander, right? So it's important to keep hazards, keeping like chairs and tables like neatly tucked away, because when residents are wandering, we don't want them to trip or fall either. And this is just another summary of what I was just talking about. So evacuating the fire zone, you evacuate the room where the fire starts first. So if there's a smoke coming from like a lunchroom, for example, you want to, if it's safe for you to check there. And if there's a resident in there, sorry, it would be a staff room, I said. So if it's a staff member in there, just say, make sure they come in and evacuate out of that room. And then you close the door and you mark it vacant. And then you continue to evacuate the zone. And you complete a head count of all the residents. So it's important to be accountable for all the residents, because sometimes they can wander off, and that's important to keep an eye on that. And you close the doors and mark them vacant. Also, something to keep in mind, if there's any windows open, you want to close them. In my experience so far, I haven't seen any residents keep the windows open, but you never know, right? So it's important just to double check. Also, when you're checking the rooms, do a sweep of the washroom too, because they may have gone in there. During my drills with the staff, I've gotten them to practice that, checking the sides of the rooms, checking the washrooms, because if you just, peek in, it might look empty, but it's really not empty. And again, if the fire is not in your home area, listen for announcements and follow instructions. Be ready to respond if necessary. And what this means is, if you're in the middle of starting something and it's safe for you to just wait, I would suggest just wait until you have been told that either the emergency is now cleared or further evacuation is needed. So just get ready to respond if necessary. And again, the charge nurse guides the evacuation and ensures announcements are made. And that sums up my training for today. Does anyone have any questions or comments? No? Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. It was a pleasure meeting you virtually. I hope the rest of your day goes well. Thank you, Sonia.
Thanks, Sunny. Take care.
Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.
We're rocketing right along. Almost there. Almost there. You got. How are you holding up? Good. Okay. I don't think our next bit is on Chronos, and your schedule is set, right, Suzanne? It's pretty much a set schedule. Like you don't need to go into Chronos to do anything.
No, I believe I'm Monday to Friday office
Right.
hours.
Okay. I don't think you have much to do with Chronos. Agency wouldn't have much to do with Chronos. My activationist and Roberto, do you put availability in Chronos?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So for yourself and Sarah, I can go through Chronos. You can stay on, Aaron. Sorry, Aaron. See, I told you I'd mess it up. Suzanne. I
thought it
told
was
you. I told you I'd mess it up.
I thought it was
You can stay on for a bit because it is that's our region software that we do Chronos with. But if you find that it's there's little other bits of info on how to navigate on the portal, which you probably already know. But for my agency team members, Lee and Ashuna, it's you don't need to be part of this one. So if you can continue to do your surge modules, especially those 3 that I mentioned, so that you're able to get scheduled. As soon as you're finished those 3, shoot me an email. Oh, I didn't show you my contact info. So if you can complete these 3 and shoot me an email when you're done, because you should be done by by 2 o'clock or so. It's that's a total of 1 hour, right? You have an hour for lunch, and if you can finish those off and then start on the balance, because once you come out of orientation mode, like I mentioned, you will have the mandatories that populate, and the mandatories, they'll have different dates. Some will have end of July, some will have end of March, because it just clumps in with the balance of our regular mandatories that were happening during the year, depending on your role. So just continue doing your search modules. That's for Lee and Ashuna. If you can continue to do that, and I can check back, or you can check, just shoot me an email when you're done. I will check in with you before 4:30 to make sure that at least those ones are done. So your scheduling component of the education, I can send an email to scheduling to say, yes, you have completed your education. You'd only be left to submit your negative PCR, and then you can get scheduled to come into the home. Okay, that's for my 2 agency team members. So you can log off and just check back with me when you're, send me an email when you're done. And I still didn't show you my contact info. So this is me. This is my email. The phone number to the home is 905-895-3628. My extension is here. My work cell is here, so you can call or text anytime. My partner is Naima Malik. My colleague, rather, is Naima Malik, and that's her extension. Our shared inbox is Senior Services Education, but you can email individually, or you can email Senior Services Inbox. Our admin assistant, Irina, is the one that monitors that. Yeah, you don't need that piece. So that's my contact info. So for Lee and Ashuna, Ayushi.
It's Ayushi, yes.
Ayushi, right.
Yes.
Sorry, I messed it up twice.
It's fine.
For Lee and Ayushi, When you're finished those 3, please shoot me an email and
Okay.
continue on with the balance of it. Okay, reach out
Okay.
if you have any questions or concerns. I'll check in with you before the end of day just to make sure that everything's copacetic. Cool.
Okay. Thank
So
you
you
so
can
much.
sign off, no problem.